I think most people in my generation have that formative social media site. And I think for my generation specifically, there's not one answer. Generation right before me, a lot of them can say MySpace, right? A lot of them can say early Facebook. But once you get into me, I'm in my late 20s, almost 30. There's just more started to crop up with Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, still having Facebook, things like MySpace going away, Reddit, 4chan, like there was just so much. And I think that each of those places shaped people in different ways. And really for me, as much as it's kind of painful to admit now, that was Twitter. I loved Tumblr and Twitter were my two big stomping grounds when I was growing up. But as far as the social media site that made me fall in love with social media and with like the concept of internet community, it was Twitter. I think I made my Twitter when I was a freshman in high school, and all throughout high school, all throughout college, it was just the place I went to when I wanted to socialize online. And this is corny as hell, but it made a huge impact on my life. I've met some of my best friends on Twitter. Some of those people were quite literally in my wedding party. Some of my best friends I went on Twitter flew out to my wedding. We go on trips together once a year. Like, it has made a genuine impact on my life. So, needless to say, with the state of Twitter, or X as it's called now, post Elon Musk taking it over, it does make me sad, and I can't fully leave it as much as I've wanted to, because it's just hard. I am truly tethered to it. Like, I'm not addicted to it. I can go several days without looking at Twitter, but I can't sever that connection because it's always been there for me. And I think that's why I wanted to make this video today, because I am nostalgic for this era of Twitter, which is such a lame thing to say out loud, but it's true. Things are changing and moving so fast that we can be nostalgic for less than 10 years ago. That's just the way the culture is. So, who am I? Why does it matter? My name is GlitchWitch.jpg. I make videos about internet horror, analog horror, digital horror, ARGs, creepypastas, internet urban legends, and then sometimes I talk about horror video games and horror films. And today we are talking about something that I think is an amalgamation of many of the things I just mentioned. We're talking about Twitter horror ARGs. That seems to be the general way that these Twitter horror pieces are described. I'll get into later what I really think this fits into as far as like subgenres of internet horror. In about a 2-year period, there were a couple of quite impactful horror stories that cropped up, horror experiences that were told solely via Twitter. And it really was a flash in the pan compared to other internet horror subgenres. Creepypasta started in 2001 with Ted the Caver and has not stopped. You're still getting creepypastas written in 2025. If anything, creepypasta have had a huge resurgence in the past 2 to 3 years. We're seeing people revisit classic creepypasta characters like Jeff the Killer, Smile Dog, just in fan art and stuff. We're seeing film adaptations of, iconic stories within the creepypasta proper fandom, like The Third Parent by Elias Witherow's getting an adaptation, and then Sydney Sweeney is starting an adaptation of another r/no sleep creepypasta. So we're getting attention on it. And then things like analog horror, well, that came out around the same time as this phenomenon of the Twitter ARG. It lasted much longer. The first analog horror was Chris Rob's Local 58, and Chris Rob has origins in, creepypastas because he wrote Candle Cove, which is one of the first creepypastas to get a, film or TV adaptation with the first season of Sci-Fi's Channel Zero. He created the first analog horror series, Local 58. In my opinion, it's the first proper analog horror series. You have series like Marble Hornets that I think is more of an unfiction, found footage TV series on the internet, and the other one that is contended as the original analog horror is CHSS, which actually had a huge Twitter component, and that Twitter component is what makes me deem CHSS an ARG rather than an analog horror. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is analog horror started in 2017 with Local 58, according to me, and that is when this phenomena started. But the Twitter ARG only lasted for about 2 years, whereas analog horror is still going strong, almost a decade later. It hasn't quite been a decade, but we're nearing it, and, as much as there's contention that analog horror is dead, that video, horror thing is here to stay, whether it's analog or digital horror, whatever you want to call it. It's not going away. There's new stuff coming out all the time. So that has withstood, and I think has the ability to have a, creepypasta trajectory that it will keep going. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. This 20-teens era was kind of strange because it was the peak of, forgive me for phrasing it this way, good creepypasta. I think there's a lot of confusion that even I had as well, that creepypasta was at the peak of its, popularity and success in 2009, because that's when you had your Jeff the Killers and things like that. But really, good narrative, solid creepypasta, like Baraska, 1999, things like that, Pen Pal, were coming out in the 20-teens. So the 20-teens was really a very important time for internet horror because there's a lot going on. Creepypasta was doing really well. And then the other big thing that for some reason I feel like we don't talk about in modern internet horror spaces as much anymore, unfiction was the hot video thing. And unfiction is such a, anomalous, weird thing, because technically it's found footage. Technically you could call it analog horror by the definition of analog horror, which is horror filmed on analog technology, but analog horror is turned into a visual style. Unfiction is essentially projects that were utilizing the medium of social media to convince you that what you were watching is a real thing. And this varied to degrees. There are some that were deeply believable, and there were some where it was clearly obvious, this isn't real, this isn't actually happening. And that's the case for, I feel like, any form of found footage, creepypasta, analog horror. Sometimes people aren't even attempting to make it believable, which is totally fine. They're just utilizing the medium to tell their story. So, on the spectrum of believable unfiction, we have things like, I think Alan Tutorial probably fooled a lot of people when it originally came out. I don't think people understood that Alan Tutorial was, a art piece. That's, of course, created by Alan Resnick, who is a, just beloved figure in internet horror. And then on the scope of, obviously this isn't real, you have Daisy Brown, which was my personal favorite unfiction project by Jules Dapper, where the titular character, Daisy Brown, has this monster puppet named Alan, and I believe that Jules, she said she did name him Alan after Alan Resnick, which I think is just really nice and sweet, where clearly he's not a real creature, but Jules committed to, that unfiction style of storytelling. So I really like unfiction. I think it's cool, and I think we've kind of dropped it. I think we've dropped it in favor of whatever analog and digital horror is turning into, which analog and digital horror is a lot more aesthetic driven. It's not trying to fool you. It's not trying to trick you as much. I think there are some examples of modern analog horror, like McKinney Family Home Videos, where some people are kind of confused. If you go into the comments of those, sometimes I've seen people be like, is this actually real? And that's just because it is more found footage based and a little, more convincing. Whereas something like The Walton Files, obviously it's not real, it's animated. That's a design choice, that's an aesthetic choice, and that's cool, and I love that as well. They're both valid, but I think that unfiction has kind of disappeared for the most part. And that's me looping back here to what I was saying earlier about the whole Twitter ARG thing and how I don't know if that's the right word for it. ARG, if you don't know, I've said it about 8 times and you may not know what I'm talking about. An ARG is an alternate reality game. They date back pre-internet, but they got more popular with the internet because you could reach a wider audience. And it is essentially a game that forces you to interact with it. When it's a non-internet ARG, and sometimes internet ARGs also make you do this, they make you get physically involved. You have to go to a location and interact with something. Or in the case of solely internet ARGs, you have to solve a puzzle to further the story. You are interacting with the, series creator by replying to them on social media or DMing them or something like that. So inherently, something like Twitter, it makes sense for it to be an ARG because you're getting people replying, you're getting people commenting, and even analog horror series, modern analog horror series have that. McKinney Family Home Videos, again, not to keep bringing it up all the time, but it is one of my favorites. The page was presented that Diana McKinney, the antagonist of the series, was running the YouTube channel, and she was replying to people's comments. So that gives it that ARG element. So that is why I think these Twitter projects were considered ARGs, because, in some cases, viewer participation impacted the story, people were getting DMs, things like that. It was inherently, easy to engage with the story, like even easier than YouTube because Twitter is so conversational in nature. However, I think truly if we're getting down to like the subgenre of internet horror that these fall under, it's unfiction. It is presenting itself as a real thing, a real person talking to you, but it's fiction. So I like to think of these as a form of unfiction, and what I'm going to do today is go through what I consider to be the 4 true Twitter ARGs. Plenty of unfiction and analog horror series have utilized Twitter or other social media to further their story, including Marble Hornets, Daisy Brown, CHSS, Hi, I'm Mary Mary. I'm sure there's more that I'm not thinking about, Ches Kids. But these 4 are really the only 4 that I can find that were solely on Twitter and had enough engagement to be covered and remembered. These were all covered by the big internet horror, YouTubers of the era. I vividly remember engaging with some of these. And it is fascinating that they span literally only from 2017 to 2018. I don't know what happened. I don't know why it stopped working. It simply could have been because people didn't buy it anymore. I'm not sure. Once I go through these 4 examples, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that this was such a genius form of internet horror storytelling, and I'm also going to talk about why I think it didn't last. And, I'm not going to do an in-depth plot summary of these 4. There's plenty of great channels that have done that, many from back in the day when it was actually happening. I'm going to link my sources for revisiting the plots of these below. Really great internet horror YouTubers who I love. So if you want full plot breakdowns, go watch those videos. I'm going to give you a plot summary and then tell you how each of these stories utilized the platform of Twitter, because they really all did it in their own way, and it worked better in some cases than others, at least in my opinion. So I'm going to go chronologically. Again, it's only 2017 and 2018, but let's go through these 4 Twitter ARGs and see what they were all about. Coming in hot at number 1 is one that I think some people may not even want to call a Twitter ARG. It's kind of a anomalous other thing, and that would be Dear David. And Dear David is kind of a now infamous internet occurrence. Dear David is a ongoing Twitter thread created by comic artist Adam Ellis in 2017, and he recalled the events of a young boy named David haunting him first in his dreams and then later coming into real life. And this was over, a couple of months. It began August 7th, 2017. So Adam Ellis, at this point, was not known as a horror creator. He was employed by BuzzFeed at this time. He is a very popular comics artist. Like, I'm putting an example of some of his work up. I'm sure you've seen it. The one I always think of is the, let people enjoy things. He did that one. But he's done a lot. Very recently, I got banned from going live on Instagram because I shared this anti-AI comic that he posted. And I don't regret it. Thank you for making it, Adam. I agree. He was not known as a horror creator. Since then, he has gone on to make several horror comics and collections of his horror comics. So he's a horror guy. But in 2017, we didn't know him as a horror guy. I think some people probably still don't know him as a horror guy, and a lot of people don't realize he's the Dear David guy, which is funny, because to me, Adam Ellis is the Dear David guy, but that's because I'm so internet horror brain rotted. He essentially started this Twitter thread just explaining, oh my god, I had this dream, but, my cats are acting weird, and just, it felt very natural. It felt the way that someone would use Twitter when they had a large enough audience to be like, oh my god, this weird thing happened to me. And he did it staggered over time. It wasn't the only thing he tweeted about in the span of the story. And, inherently having it start in a dream makes it more believable. It ends up going into the real world. David physically manifests and things like that. But, it's buyable. And you get bought in because, this is a person you followed for a while. Oh my god, he's got a creepy ghost story. And there's something about a Twitter thread, I think, for users of Twitter that is just so enticing. I don't know why. I'm someone who's a veteran Twitter user at this point, and I get excited when I see a thread. I want to read it. It's an easily digestible way to consume a story, and I think that's why these work so well for me. So, beyond just having it start with being from a dream, I think the other reason why this was so successful is you have a public figure, essentially. Someone who is popular, so that you're going to instantly get a lot of eyes on it. So that helped Dear David kind of catapult into popularity because he had enough people already following him. He didn't have to worry about, organically building up attention around this. This was done really well, I think. I'm very impressed by the photo edits. I don't quite know what David is. I don't know if he's a doll. I don't know if it's a 3D model. I don't know, but the photos of David in real life, genuinely unsettling. And he did a great job of fully sticking to Twitter, literal written out tweets, and then supplementary photos and videos. Photos of his cats, photos of David, drawings of David, because he is a comics artist. Makes sense, right? It wasn't too photo or video heavy that it felt, like it was a story. And it wasn't written out big, giant blocks of text or screenshots of notes apps or anything like that, where it was too much exposition at once. He made it feel real, and he maintains to this day that it really happened. He will not admit that it's a story, which I love. I think that's great. We've kind of lost that in internet horror for good and bad reasons. I do think that, internet horror creators should take credit for their stories and their work, which is, I think, one of the reasons we kind of went away from nonfiction. But, Adam is someone who is already successful, so I kind of get it. Now, the thing that sucks about Dear David, and I think is one of the many potential death knells of this format of storytelling, there was a movie adaptation released in 2023, and I remember seeing this trailer and being like, are you f***ing kidding me? Because it's just got BuzzFeed all over it. They name dropped the BuzzFeed thing, that he worked for BuzzFeed in the trailer several times. And I was kind of like, god damn, why are we doing this, Mr. Ellis? And I later found out he got no money for this at all, because everything he made while working for BuzzFeed belongs to BuzzFeed, which is so scummy. I didn't know this, that it was to that level until he publicly talked about this. But I'm not surprised, because you see a lot of very popular internet creators have left BuzzFeed to pursue their own thing, like the Try Guys, BuzzFeed Unsolved, Sophia, people like that, and I get it, because clearly they were, in these super intense contracts that were, very violating, and the fact that, you know, tweets that someone made while employed by them belonged to them, that's scary, and that's so gross, and, like, a plague upon ye, BuzzFeed. So he actually left BuzzFeed because he tried to sell the concept, the film rights of Dear David to Ryan Murphy, but BuzzFeed wouldn't let him do it and said, hey, we own it. So he ended up quitting. So the movie was just panned. Like, people hate it. I haven't seen it. I'm never gonna see it. Like, before, when I thought he was still involved, I was like, okay, it looks shitty, but I'll watch it just to, you know, be part of the internet horror zeitgeist, but I have no interest. He didn't get money. He didn't get to have any input on the vision. Don't need it. We have the Twitter thread. That's how I feel about it. And I think that this is a really great example of, you know, traditional media and you know, filmmakers and studios not getting internet horror and just, like, fumbling the bag. I think the other big example is the Slender Man movie that was just kind of cursed from inception and then got worse and worse because it came out around the same time that the Slender Man stabbings happened, and that family was pleading, please don't put this out, which really they shouldn't have. They should have pulled it. And, you know, it's funny because that movie sucks, but we have Marble Hornets. Like, if you want a Slender Man TV show or movie, go watch Marble Hornets. It's right there. I'm hopeful that we're getting to a point where they're letting the creators be involved enough that, like, good shit comes out. Because, like, I mentioned Cancel Cove and Chris Straub and Channel Zero earlier. Channel Zero got creepypasta. Like, they understood the assignment. And so I'm hopeful that things like the A24 Backrooms will be good because Kane Pixels is involved. I'm hopeful that The Third Parent is going to be good because Elias Witherow is credited as a writer. So I think we're heading to a good place, and hopefully this Dear David mishap is one of the last examples of, you know, internet horror creators being treated like shit in the process of going mainstream. So that's Dear David. That's technically the first, but it's kind of a weird one because I don't know if he set out for it to turn into this. Like, part of me wonders, did it really start with a dream? And then he was like, wait, this is kind of picking up steam. What if I, like, roll with this? I don't know. And we won't ever know because I don't think he's ever going to admit that it's not real. Which, honestly, like I said, kind of cool. I love that. I love that he's doubling down. Like, David's real. I don't know what to tell you. Next, we have one that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is at Teletubbies Fact. So, Teletubbies Fact, I made an entire video covering this because I think it's the least appreciated and least remembered of all of these Twitter ARGs. And please go watch that if you want the full. I give the full plot breakdown of Teletubbies Facts and the downfall of it. It's crazy. Teletubbies Facts is nuts. It is a Twitter ARG about a parody account called Teletubbies Facts that devolves into a story about a man who becomes a family annihilator and is on the run from the police. And oh my god, it's just nuts. It's some of the best horror comedy I've ever seen in internet horror. Horror comedy is very hard to do in internet horror because you're often trying to have that sense of realism. Truly the greatest of all internet horror comedies is Gilbert Garfield, but this is a close second for me. I just love it. I don't like a lot of creepypastas that are kind of silly, goofy. Like, Creepcast just did burger entries last week. That's just not for me. I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just not for me. I don't even really like comedy. Like, I'm not going to choose to watch a comedy movie. Really, I have a very specific sense of humor. That's not me being like, I have an elevated sense of humor. No. I'm just weird. I love Teletubby Facts. It's so ridiculous and over the top. And this was the one that I actively stumbled upon and followed to its, I don't want to say conclusion because there wasn't a conclusion, but I did follow along with it until it fizzled out. So it's special to me because I was truly boots on the ground from, like, the moment. Like, I didn't need Rainbot or Loey Lane to tell me about this. I stumbled upon it organically. Whereas all these other ones, except for maybe Dear David, you know, I found out about it because Rainbot covered it. The thing about Teletubbies Facts is it introduces this idea of like multiple accounts talking to each other, building a world. We have Teletubbies Facts, our main character, Dave, and then we have the other Twitter account, @SharonTeletubby, which is originally run by his wife Sharon, who he ends up murdering. It's then run by her parents, who he ends up murdering, and then it is run by the Utah Police Department, which is so funny. Like, that is peak humor to me, that the Utah Police Department is tweeting from @SharonTeletubby to be like, Dave is on the run, he has killed 5 people. Like, I love it. I think it's so funny. This, again, is one that I think is not trying to be believable. Dear David, he's committed to making that as realistic and believable as possible. This is avant-garde performance art. It's ridiculous and it's over the top. It's making fun of internet horror, it's making fun of parody accounts, and I think it's making fun of true crime culture as well, because this is 2017. True crime's really starting to get, as you know, at its peak before there was any sort of critical, you know, thought of, is this a bad thing that we're doing? And I mean, I'm guilty as charged. I was a true crime diva. I still follow true crime stuff, but I have definitely self-reflected on, you know, the moral implications of being like a true crime stanny. And I think this does a good job at, you know, showing how ridiculous the glorification of like serial killers and stuff can be. This one really engaged the audience. It was shitting on people and it started to actively DM people images of severed heads, which has not been archived, and it's probably not like actual gore, it's probably like something from a movie, but it started to freak people out, specifically Miss Loie Lane, who is still a YouTuber to this day, and she was following this story, and they started talking to her, and she was just essentially saying, like, this is actually freaking me out. Like, I know it's kind of crazy, but, you know, like, I'm covering it so intently, I'm spending all my hours of the day covering this, it's getting to me a little bit. It's kind of getting into my head. Because of that, people started reporting the account, it got the account taken down, then Teletubbies Facts blamed Loie initially for it getting taken down, but then retracted that. It was just kind of a misfortunate situation that I think some people misinterpreted Loie's intention. Like, I think she was just being like, oh my god, I need to take a step away, like, this story is getting to me too much, whereas they thought she felt actually threatened. I don't think the creator of Teletubbies Facts ever had any ill intent. I do think they didn't know where it was going. I think that it wasn't super well thought out, whereas I look at Dear David and I'm like, after the initial dream, Adam Ellis sat down and wrote a script. At least, not a script, but he wrote a page of notes, I have a feeling, of where this is going to go. Sure, it's got to be organic, it's got to be able to change based on how people interact. This, I think that this creator was probably flying by the seat of their pants, and didn't expect it to take off the way that it did. So this is kind of the chaotic one. This is the wild card, this is the not as thought out one. That doesn't have as, like, strong of a narrative as the other 3 that I'm talking about, but it has a place in my heart. It's the least remembered of these 4 stories, and part of that, unfortunately, is because it was not archived. The account got purged. The only archive that exists are from videos like Loie Lane's and Rainbot's. There's no archive on Reddit. Twitter also just did its own weird Twitter purge in the late 2010s where they were just randomly banning accounts for no reason. So it kind of sucks that it doesn't exist in its original form. The other 3 of these do. They've been archived or they're still up on Twitter. So it makes me sad. You know, I googled Teletubby Facts Twitter and I hit images yesterday just to see if, you know, how many tweets I could find. And my thumbnail for my video on it is the first thing that comes up. Like, that should not be the case. I'm honored. And if that's what I'm remembered for, my god, I'm so happy. But it makes me sad that it's not better archived. So, moving on, that was August 2017. We're following that up. So that's very close to Dear David. Those were kind of running almost concurrently. Next, we have The Sun Vanished. The sun vanished, I think, is the one that people think of when they think of Twitter ARGs. And this was created by Theodore Wish and Davey Peppers with help from a Twitter user called 555 Comics. So you'll notice the Teletubbies creator has never come out and said who they are. This one has its creators, has outed itself as an ARG and a story, which, as I get into this, there's no way they couldn't have. And then we know Adam Ellis did Dear David, but he's not admitting it was a story. So all of these, you can already see, are handling it in very different ways. Yes, the creator of Teletubbies Facts came out as Teletubbies Facts, or as Sharon Teletubby being like, yeah, it's a story, whatever, like, you ruined the story, you ruined the bit, but they never came out as them as a real person. Adam Ellis is like, hi, I'm popular artist Adam Ellis, also this really happened to me, I don't care what you say. And then this one is very much a written out story that this group of people just chose Twitter to tell it through. So this began April 30th, 2018. So I'm not sure if they had seen Dear David and that inspired them, or the Teletubbies one. I have a feeling probably not the Teletubbies one, but who knows. And this is the longest running one. It kept going through March of 2020, had a hiatus because of COVID, and then returned in October of 2021. And The Sun Vanished is exactly what it sounds like. It is a story where a Twitter user called @TheSunVanished wakes up to find that the sun is gone. There are in-universe news broadcasts that he posts showing that the sun is gone. It is a global problem. It turns into that there are these creatures that are people that get turned when they're exposed to this like bright light. And, you know, I think initially this one did a good job at like building the world that it existed in. You know, with Dear David, there's not a world that needs to be built. It's just Adam Ellis's life. With Teletubby updates, there's just, it's not a believable situation whatsoever. There's no attempt to make it believable. I mean, for sake, you have the Utah Police Department tweeting from @Sharon Teletubby. This is doing a good job of setting the scope of this world, setting, you know, the sense of urgency. It feels the way you feel in a natural disaster. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced any form of, like, extended natural disaster. I live in Georgia. I live in hurricane country. Last year we were hit by Helene, and I live pretty rurally, so, like, my town was out of power for, like, I live right downtown. My town has, like, 2,000 people in it. I live right in the middle, and we didn't get power for like 5 days. The wider county of mine, some of them didn't get it for months. So I understand that sense of like fear and urgency. I related to it, and it buys you in. The things that they create, like the news broadcasts, feel very real. They're done very well. Any of the photos and footage, I think, are done very well. They utilize the medium really well by having these polls that Twitter users can interact with, and they have openly said they had to change the story based on how those polls turned out. Now, there are a lot of things that doesn't work for me with The Sun Vanished that makes me say, you could have done this, maybe not on Twitter. One of the biggest problems I have with it is they post so much plot and exposition through text message conversations between characters to a point that, like, this isn't utilizing Twitter as well as I think the other two did. For one that's attempting to be believable so much at the beginning, I start to lose the believability. Like, why would you be posting your intimate conversations with your best friend, your fights, to your Twitter audience? When shit starts to really go down, why would you keep posting on Twitter? With Teletubby updates, as unrealistic as it is, that character of Dave is so frenetic and insane, of course he would keep tweeting. Like, I fully believe that. And with Dear David, you know, Adam Ellis is popular, the story picked up, of course he wants to keep updating people. It's going to propel his career, it's going to get him more attention. Like, that's believable to me. We start getting, like, involvement from, like, government, military, weird, crazy stuff that's like, brother, put the phone down. Like, you need to run for your life at this point. So this suffers from what I like to call in internet horror Lonely Girl 15 syndrome. If you're not familiar, Lonely Girl 15 is the original unfiction series, and it was a YouTube channel called Lonely Girl 15 run by a teenage girl. It was her vlog channel. She was just chilling, talking about her life, and slowly she slipped in little things that just were kind of off about like her upbringing, her family, her religion, and the first chunk of it, super good. Like, done super well, and then people found out it wasn't real. Everyone believed her at first, of course, because this was a new thing. But then they saw the actress on, like, IMDb or something, and it ruined the immersion, and instead of, like, just continuing along, they were like, well, everyone knows that's fiction, let's make it fiction, and there was, like, superpowers and secret agents, and it went off the walls, and didn't become enjoyable, at least to me, anymore, and that's what this suffers from. And I just don't know. I don't think that Twitter was the best avenue for this story to be told. I think in the beginning they did things that utilized the platform in a really, really cool way, but, you know, they clearly wanted to tell this story, and they favored the story over the, you know, narrative device of using Twitter. And, of course, that sounds silly that I'm wanting to favor the you know, platform over the story, but I kind of am, because I think this is a unique way to tell a story, and you should fit within the parameters of that platform as much as you can. Because otherwise, this could have gone on Reddit and been just like a creepypasta or something. I feel conflicted, because the stuff that they did in the beginning, like, you know, having the viewer input, doing the world building of the broadcast and stuff, I think was really cool. But the story just gets so kind of bonkers and off the rails and becomes way too much about, like, the interpersonal relationships and stuff that it kind of loses me. So, sorry to all my The Sun Vanished fans out there. I'm still grateful for its contributions to internet horror. And The Sun Vanished lasted too long. Frankly, it just kept going, and it should have stopped. I think internet horror can't overstay its welcome, and this one I think did. You're asking a lot for people to wait to updates to a Twitter thread for 2 years. And there certainly were people that wanted to, but it just kind of fell off, and, you know, it's too long for a platform like that, and Twitter itself went through so many changes between, you know, 2018 and 2020, let alone to 2021, and obviously since then it's batshit and off the rails, but that's a hard ask, which I'll get more into that later. But let's go on to the fourth and final, which I think is probably the most successful to me, and maybe is probably, like, as much as I love Teletubbies Facts, this one I think is the crown jewel of Twitter ARGs, and that is Gregory88. Gregory88 started on July 22nd, 2018, and concluded on January 16th, 2019. And the plot of Gregory88 is that a man named Greg takes over his estranged grandfather's lake house after his grandfather passes away because he's left it in his will. And he discovers that there is something sinister happening in the woods. Gregory started his Twitter before, he didn't just start delivering the information. He laid the groundwork, was just making casual tweets, which obviously was the case for 3 out of 4 of these. Adam Ellis had a following, had a normal Twitter account, so that was fine. Teletubbies Facts started as just like an edgelord parody account before the story began, and then here we have Greg just being a normal guy. So that's always a plus to me. The sun vanished just came out, oh my god guys, why did the sun vanish? And the account was called @thesunvanished. So, you know, that feels more like a plant than these ones. And Gregory does a good job of just being Twitter bait, not relying on text messages or Notes app or, you know, screenshots of DMs or anything like that. It's all Twitter and supplemental photos and videos that I think are very effective, similarly to how Dear David is. And there is this woman in the woods that Gregory keeps seeing that he initially thinks is a threat but ends up being an ally, and she doesn't have eyes. And the makeup on this is done very well. It's very effective for, again, just being like, oh, I'm taking a picture with my camera, similar to how Dear David, David is very effective in those images that Adam posted. So I think this is done really well, and the large moments of exposition make sense because he's delivering it in, like, update threads. He's not, like, tweeting as he's walking and tweeting as he's going. He'll be like, oh my god, y'all, you won't believe what happened today, and then delivers a, like, 5-tweet long thread explaining an occurrence, and it feels natural. It feels the way that Twitter worked. And, the world is built really well. He goes into town. He's like, this is kind of weird. There's stuff with eggs. Again, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the plot, but the egg thing is, forgive the pun, laid out very early and pans out to be something more. And I just think it's short and it's sweet, but it's done really well. And it was left open-ended that there was going to be, like, an update a year later. That never happened. I'm okay with that. I would rather it sit and exist as it did than, wait a year and then it jumps the shark or pulls a Lonely Girl 15. And this one, I think, has reached a more recent audience because Creepcast, Wendigoon, and Meat Canyon covered it on Creepcast, and they did not love it. I think that's not the venue for these stories, though. I don't think Creepcast or an audio platform works for a Twitter ARG. I think you gotta read it on Twitter, to be honest, or watch a video of someone showing the tweets. But even then, going back and watching a video, it's not the same as sitting and reading the thread. Luckily, Gregory88 still exists, Dear David thread still exists, and the Sun Vanish still exists. Unluckily, Teletubbies Facts, you gotta watch my video, you gotta watch Rainbot's video, or you gotta watch Loey Lane's videos. Me and Rainbot have it in, like, one video. Loey Lane has several. Not to try to get you to watch me over certifiable queens of internet horror, but I don't know what it is about Teletubbies Facts and the girlies being drawn to it, but the girlies are your archival source for Teletubbies Facts. Those are the 4 big ones. Again, there's probably more that weren't as big. You may have a favorite one that didn't take off as much. Those, to me, are just the 4, like, ones that are still remembered about a decade later. And again, there's a lot of unfiction or analog horror series that had Twitter elements. So I'm not really wanting to go into those because I feel like the Twitter was supplemental rather than integral. I would say CHSS probably used it the most as far as it being, like, more integral. The rest that I mentioned earlier, it was kind of just to pad out the world. Especially some of the earlier ones. It's going to feel more real if there's social media attached to it. I'm very endeared by this form of storytelling. I think very fondly of Gregory88 and of Teletubbies Fact specifically. They're just so unique to me. And I think they are the, late 20-teens era's version of innovative, immersive storytelling. The 70s and the 90s had found footage. People thought that Cannibal Holocaust was real. There was literally a trial because of it. Blair Witch Project was so believable. People thought it was completely real, scared the pants off of everyone. After that, you had the 2000s with creepypasta. People truly believed Ted the Caver died. People thought that the Diana house was a real archive of emails. It felt real. It pulled you in. Even slightly later, creepypastas like Normal for Normal People thought that was a real website. My husband thought that was a real website because the cultural zeitgeist around it makes it feel real. People believed Herobrine. People believed Sonic.exe. So after creepypasta, we got this, utilizing this new, social media wasn't new in 2017, but it was truly important and part of the culture at that point. It was in the mainstream. You could get more eyes on things. So I completely get why people were trying to experiment and tell stories this way. I think Twitter was the one that makes sense, to be honest. Facebook was already kind of deviating towards an older audience, and I don't think they would have caught on as well. Tumblr was a platform for like weirdo freaks, or to be honest, so it just wasn't the venue. I don't think it would have been taken seriously. I think everyone's such a like shit poster over there, it wouldn't have been received very well. And then obviously like Instagram is so photo based. There have been Instagram ARGs, but as far as for delivering a narrative story like this, like Twitter made the most sense. You can info dump without it feeling like too much, and then you can also still post photos and videos, and it's easier to engage with your viewer than something like Reddit, in my opinion. You can directly reply to a tweet. So it's just easier to use in that sense. So it makes complete sense, and I think it was a smart thing to explore. However, I understand why it was not long for this world. They lose believability very quick, and the sooner you stop believing a Twitter ARG, the less likely you are to want to follow through, I think. I think with big stories posted on Reddit or other forums and filmed or animated, videos, there's a longer shelf life for running with that even when you know it's a story. When you find out that the Twitter thread you're reading is fake, it almost just feels like you're being lied to, rather than like, oh, I'm presenting you with a short film, or oh, I'm presenting you with a short story. So I think that the shelf life is just not there. And you have to tell it quickly, I think, as well. There's no waiting. If you pause your Twitter thread for 2 years, people are not going to come back the way they would come back to a YouTube channel. It's just not the way that social media works. It's hard to access a tweet from a month ago, let alone 5 years ago. It's just not an easy thing to do with that platform. It's so fast moving. That's why I think the most successful ones are told within like a week to a month span. That's why The Sun Vanished is just too much to me. It just goes on for too long. And I think it's why it's smart that Gregory stopped. If Gregory came back a year later, I think it would have just been hard to maintain and still be enjoyable. Were there people clamoring for more years later if you go to the Gregory threads? Yes. But I have a feeling that the story just wouldn't have been as good and people would have been disappointed. Again, the thing that's hard, because things are moving a mile a minute, there is no way to easily consume the story without sitting there and reading every tweet, unless like a popular YouTuber covered it. So again, all of these examples, I'm sitting here telling you about them because they've been covered by popular YouTubers. Even in the moment when I was chronically online, very active on Twitter, the only one I came across organically and like engaged with was Teletubbies Facts. I saw Dear David, I think, probably organically, but I didn't really engage with it. Probably because I was like, Adam Ellis, he's a comics artist, like he's not my favorite comics artist or anything, so like whatever. And then Sun Vanished and Gregory, I only knew about those because Rainbot posted about them. Like that's the only reason. And I went and kept following The Sun Vanished for a little bit after she had initially posted about it, but like Gregory was done by the time I even knew it existed. It's harder to follow and to parse together than like multiple Reddit posts. Those are just, they're bigger, they're easier to read. Beyond that, Twitter has a higher rate of accounts being deactivated, accounts being deleted, things not being archived correctly. No one's wanting to archive tweets the way they're wanting to archive photos, videos, stories, traditional stories. So, that's how we lost Teletubbies Facts. The account got nuked. No one thought to screenshot it besides these brave YouTubers that, were covering it. And thank God they did, or we would have lost a pretty interesting, innovative point in the history of internet horror. Like, Teletubbies Facts, to me, it needs to be remembered because it is avant-garde and it pushed the boundaries of what internet horror could be. How many of these existed that no one remembers, that no one archived, that no one engaged with? You have to inherently get enough people to engage with it, and they need to engage with it in time. A YouTube account, like an analog horror creator, it can sit there for 2 years and then suddenly blow up. That's happened before. So that's okay. You can play the waiting game. If the creator is willing to play the waiting game, that's fine. A tweet is going to get lost in a sea of tweets, so it's just the odds are stacked against it as a viable way to continue to do this. You know, and now it couldn't exist on the modern Twitter or X. It's just not the site it used to be. It's hostile, it pushes right-wing propaganda at you because of the, you know, now owner, and it's just not a fun place to be. It's not a supportive place, it's not an engaging place. Sure, Twitter has always been questionable, don't get me wrong, there's always been problems with bullying and harassment, but it is just so far from what it was in 2017 nowadays. So this could never ever work on modern X. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that I think that Twitter ARGs really fall into the unfiction umbrella of internet horror. And that's the thing that, as I've been working on this video, I can't quite pin down why unfiction is all but gone. I don't know why unfiction pivoted to analog and digital horror, other than the big key thing to me is creators wanting to be credited and wanting to get, you know, recognized for the work they put into this. And I'm not knocking that. I think that's one of the greatest things Chris Straub did to the internet horror community is say, hey, I wrote Handle Code, run me a check, we're making a TV show. Hey, I made Local 58. He came out, he didn't hide that he made Local 58. From the get, the very first Local 58 episode ends with created by Chris Straub. So we associate all these analog horror projects with their creators. Martin Paredes made the Walton Files. Alex Kister made the Mandela Catalog. Remy Abode made Gemini Home Entertainment. Nick Catrufo made the McKinney Family Home Videos. And I think all these people deserve the credit that they're getting. But I think it's kind of interesting that we've all but lost, you know, the taste for unfiction projects. That there's not, you know, still a few people that are like, I don't want to be credited, but I want to try this style of storytelling. But honestly, what may be the case is it may be out there, but there's not an audience for it anymore because we've all pivoted to analog horror and stuff like that. And I think that that's the thing that the internet really has lost in 2025. No one's going to believe anything anymore. And I think I don't want to say we, I know I personally, I do yearn for an age where kids would see a scary, you know, paranormal ghost video on YouTube and believe it. It was a simpler time, it was a nicer time, but we will never get that back, and now we're dealing with the most terrible, nihilistic, nasty version of that experience, which is misinformation, and a lot of it is thanks to artificial intelligence, generative AI, creating purposely fake videos, trying to trick people and ensue hatred and chaos, and that's not what I want. That's not fun. That's not innocent. That's not trying to tell a story. That's just trying to start bad things. So I am deeply nostalgic for this type of thing because I remember that this is what the internet could be. And I feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle sometimes when people, you know, hawk things like dead internet theory and, you know, we all need to get offline. There's nothing good of being online. I think there's a chance that maybe we could get back to this. And the internet horror community is the thing that shows me that it's worth it to keep going. It's a community that has existed essentially since the inception of the internet and has evolved and changed with the times. And I hope that it keeps sticking around because the through line always in the internet horror community is the community. It is the people. It is art created by people. It is championed and cheered on by people like me and you. And we are encouraging these artists and these creators to keep creating. It's magic, and I love it. And thankfully, for the most part, I'm seeing not too much AI within internet horror. It's there. I've wanted to make a video about that, especially within the analog horror space. There's one series in particular. I'm not wanting to name it or get into it right at this moment. If you guys would like me to make a video about AI and internet horror, I would. It will be a very strongly worded video though, and I'm a little scared to make it. But for the most part, this community is very good at staying human and staying connected for the sake of storytelling. And that's very special to me, and that's why I want to be a part of it, and that's why I want to champion up-and-coming creators, but I also, at times, want to pause and remember the people who, built the blocks to where we are today. And sure, these guys are in the middle of the house, because obviously creepypasta set the stage, but I think this is a very important point in the timeline of internet horror that I fear will be forgotten, and I fear will not be respected or taken seriously because what Twitter has turned into is such a joke. So that's why I wanted to make this video. I wanted to shout out, for very unique stories and how they utilize the platform in different ways, and just why I am so passionate about some of these little things I got to actually experience in real time, and just for a hope for people to keep, pushing the boundaries of what internet storytelling can be. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any of these social media ARGs you remember, please comment below, because like I said, I'm sure there are some that I didn't cover. These were very much just the top of the food chain, if you will. And as always, recommend any creepypastas or analog horrors or anything you want me to cover. And I do want to say, because I've gotten some comments, if I haven't covered your comment, your suggestion, it doesn't mean I'm not going to. I write those down. I like to have an ongoing list of things I can pull from, because I don't want to just make 6 analog horror videos in a row or 6 creepypasta videos in a row. So, I'm working through the list when, when there's room for a creepypasta, I'll slot that in. When there's room for an analog horror, I'll slot that in. And the way that analog horror is, unfortunately, it's current. So when projects that I've covered in the past come up with something new, I often will push that to the top because it's, pertinent information to what you guys want to hear, I would think, updates on new things, analysis on new things. So that's just how that works. So please don't think that if you commented, I'm never going to cover it. I appreciate your comments. I love your comments. I try to like and interact as much as I can, but I am only one person, and this is not my job. This is just my hobby. But I appreciate you all for commenting, and I promise I'm going down the list. And I've gotten some of my favorite things of all time from viewer comments, so trust me, I appreciate you very much. Speaking of appreciate, I'd like to appreciate my YouTube members. The creepypasta OCs are up on screen, and then in Survival Horror Emo we have E-Rob and So-Called Punk, and then in Animal Horror Scary Face we have Kira Coffer and Alpha Can. If you would like to become a YouTube member, there's a little button down there, join, next to the subscribe. Don't feel like you have to though. You can subscribe, like, comment, share. That means the world, and I just thank you so much for watching. And if you see something online that looks like it might be compelling narrative fiction disguised as a tweet or a post or a Instagram, screenshot it, for the love of God. Please screenshot it, because we want to have an archive of these things. Please. And things like the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine are great. Nick Nocturne's Nightmind Library is a great place for this stuff too. So shout out to everyone trying to preserve all of this stuff. You are truly doing the Lord's work. Thank you so much for watching. I covered so many things, I don't even know what my parting reference should be. Don't pick eyes up out of the water like Gregory did. I think that's not a good idea. Bye.